Hello, so today we're going to be looking at adding some flies to our nature scene. So today it's going to be super straightforward. There's nothing complex or advanced about this, no high geometry or anything, no actual fly models involved. It's super basic, just a cloner and some basic primitives, that's it. So we'll jump straight into Cinema. So first thing we need to do is we need to come over to our panel at the side, make a cloner. Or if you still are on an older version, then I'm sure your icons are still up the top here where they used to be. Yeah, just create yourself a cloner. First thing we're going to do in our cloner settings is we're going to change our mode to endpoint. We're going to keep our object mode on grid, that's fine. And for now we'll just leave that how it is, and we're going to create ourselves some primitives to put into the cloner. So for that we're going to come to our primitive shape and we're going to create a platonic. I always use a platonic because it has more faces to capture and reflect. It looks nicer when it's moving around and more random, which suits the movement of a fly much better. Okay, so I'm just going to make this, I'm going to drag this down. I'm going to create, for a little bit of variation, I'm going to create one or two more platonics. So if you just hold Control and drag it down, or just press copy and paste, CV, whichever one you want. Control and drag's usually easier, whatever you want to do, it's up to you. So obviously these are too big, this is a really big fly. Let's make it a lot smaller. Let's make our first one, if we click on our platonic, let's make our first one 0.2. Our second one 0.4 and our third one 0.6. So nice and small. Yeah, let's zoom back out. So we're gonna make these platonics a child of the cloner. As you can see, we have our platonics on each point of the cloner there. So what we want to do is we just want to, over on our cloner, we just want to whack up the count. You see the count increasing there. Let's just, anything random, we're not specifically tied to any numbers here. Let's just create a couple on the y-axis as well, and obviously the y-axis on the size is at 0, so you won't see any clones going up. So let's increase that y-axis as well. That will do really for now for this tutorial. You know, there's no specific numbers, we're just making some flies, I suppose. I mean, this could be as many as you wanted. You could have thousands of flies if you wanted to, but for the purpose of this, let's just random numbers and let's go. So the first thing I want to do before I start going any further is I just want to, on our object mode and our cloner, where it says clones and iterate, I want to change that to random. All that's going to do is randomly distribute the different size platonics around the cloner in the space, that's all. Just for a little bit more variation. Obviously we are trying to make flies which are completely random, which are completely chaotic, so we want to try and mimic that as much as we can. So what we want to do to get these flies to start moving, if we press play at the moment there's nothing happening, we want to add a dynamics tag. We want to make all these flies dynamic. So we're going to come to our cloner and we're going to right click and we're going to add a simulation tag rigid body. Now what we do when we press, what we see when we press play now is that all of our flies are just going to fall away. Now this is super basic rigid body stuff. Immediately there is gravity in the scene, so all of our rigid flies are just gonna go with gravity and just fall forever into space, and that's not what we want. So how we're gonna fix that is we're gonna press Control and D, or Command and D if you're on Mac, and it looks like we've just come straight to it. So we want to go to our simulation tag and we want to go over to scene, and where it says gravity we want to change that to 0. So now when we press play, see that absolutely nothing happens. That's spot on. There's 0 gravity affecting those clones, there's 0 forces affecting them, so they're doing absolutely nothing. Great. So just before we carry on, where it says 90 frames down here, we want to give ourselves a little bit more time. So I'm going to change that to 500. So we've got loads more time to play within the scene. Now, to get a little bit of movement out of these flies, to get some life out of these, we need some sort of force to affect them. And the best way of doing that, to get the chaotic movement of a fly, is to add some simple turbulence. So with our cloner selected, I'm just going to come over to our simulate tab, and I'm just going to go to forces and add a turbulence. I'm not going to touch anything on the turbulence settings yet. We're just going to see what it looks like from default. Okay, so now we've got a little bit of movement. They're not moving very much at the moment. We need to pick that up. Let's go to our turbulence. Let's start whacking these settings up. Let's start putting some random numbers in. Let's go for 50, and let's up our scale as well. Let's put our scale to, I don't know, 25. As I said, we're not tied to any specific numbers right now. We're just creating some flies. Don't worry about it. Feel free to play. Add as many or as few flies as you want. Make it as strong or as weak as you want. But let's see what this looks like now. Okay, so we've got some good movement. You can see how this is really starting to pretty much be there already. As I said, this is a super basic tutorial. There aren't many steps involved. There's pretty much only one more step from here. And as you can see at the moment, our flies are just sort of doing what flies do, and they are flying away, but we want our flies to sort of stay together a little bit more in that specific environment, so we have a little bit more control over them. And how we're going to do that, instead of sort of getting a random fly explosion, we're going to come over to our dynamics tag, and we're going to come to our forces tab, and all we're going to do is where it says follow position, we're just going to change that to 1. All that's going to do is that's going to sort of force these platonics to sort of try and stay around their original space in the cloner. And if you just press play now, look at that, you can see we have some much more obedient flies. That looks much better. Now if that's just floating above your nice water scene, some nice calm flies, it's a little bit too calm for now, but you can see how the effect is coming together. So all we need to do now is just increase this turbulence. I suppose depending on how sporadic you want your flies to be, you can just increase this turbulence. If you want our flies to be a little bit more natural, I think they're a little bit slow at the moment. So I'm just going to double this strength. I'm going to whack it up to 100. And there we go. You can see how we've sort of got the effect already. We've got some nice randomly moving flies. Now imagine if this was just above your lake or above your water, this would look spot on. Without taking it too much further, the one last thing I tend to do when I'm creating these flies is when I'm texturing them. Let's just get onto that dead quick. If you just create a nice standard Redshift material, if we double click to open that up, what I usually tend to do is just add a nice quick glass preset. Simple as that. Don't try and focus on the flies too much because you can't really see them anyway. You're just after that little flicker of a presence and that nice little reflection and refraction catching the light. That's all you're after. So once you've got your preset glass, a good little thing I tend to add is down in the refraction, add a little bit of dispersion. Don't worry about pushing it through the roof. I just add a little bit of dispersion, and that just gives you that little bit of aberration, that little bit of chromatic aberration in your refraction. Obviously we're trying to mimic flies, and flies are covered in all sorts of fumes and diesel and all sorts that add these nice flickery reflections. So yeah, as a basic rule of thumb, that's all I tend to do. Add a nice glass, add it to our platonics, and yeah, I mean I can't see them now in the viewport. I'll take them off for now so we can still see them. But that's pretty much it. That's the effect. So yeah, thanks for tuning in. That's your flies for your nature scene. Do whatever you want with these. It's a nice, super straightforward technique to follow. And yeah, if you liked it, let me know. Feel free to come back. If there's anything else you want to learn about in the future, just pop it in the comments. If I know about it, I'll try and get a video up there and I'll try and help you out. And yeah, thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you next time.